My name is Dr. Ilina Singh, and I'm the Principal Investigator for the Voices Project. Voices stands for Voices on Identity, Childhood, Ethics and Stimulants. Children join the debate. Thanks for joining us for a groundbreaking series of animated shorts. These shorts tell us, in children's own voices, what it's like to have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, and to take stimulant medications like Ritalin or Adderall. We made the shorts by using audio clips from our interviews with children, so these voices are the real thing. I've been researching families and children with ADHD for over a decade. ADHD, Ritalin, Adderall, these are controversial topics. Hardly a week goes by without them being in the news somewhere in the world. There are lots of different opinions on ADHD and Ritalin-type drugs. You will have heard parents, teachers, doctors, and politicians tell us what they think, often in rather forceful ways. But what I realized early in my research on ADHD was that we rarely hear from children. We don't hear their experiences with ADHD or their experiences with stimulant drugs or other treatments. It's almost always other people telling us about what children think and feel. This is a really important part that's missing from this debate. It's important for two reasons. The first is that children are part of our lives and our communities, and they have a right to have a voice in the debates over ADHD and Ritalin-type drugs. The second is that there are some rather serious ethical concerns about the use of these drugs in children, and we ought to find out if these concerns match children's experiences. One big concern is for children's safety. You will hear Professor Peter Hill, an eminent child psychiatrist in London, talk a bit about the safety of stimulant drugs in this series. In the Voices Project, we were interested in three main areas. First, we were interested in what you might call the zombie effect. You hear people say, oh, Ritalin turns kids into zombies or robots. Well, we wanted to know if children generally felt that way about being on stimulant drugs, that it turned them into someone or something else. We were also interested in responsibility. Does a child with an ADHD diagnosis use the diagnosis or the medication to avoid taking responsibility for his behavior or as an excuse for poor behavior? I didn't take my medication, so I'm not to blame. Or, I have ADHD, my brain made me do it. And we were interested in stigma, or what some people think of as the label of being a kid with ADHD. How do children manage their ADHD and their medication out there in public, with their parents, their peers, their teachers, and how are they treated by others? These were our main concerns as researchers in the Voices Project. We had over 150 families in the study, and we interviewed boys and girls between the ages of 9 and 14. They talked to us in response to our questions, but they also did some drawings of their brains and filled out some questionnaires. As you will hear in the series of animated shorts, children had lots of rather amazing and interesting things to say about these issues and many others. So what did we find out? Well, surprisingly, most children we spoke to felt okay about being on stimulant medication. What we heard most consistently was that medication helps them stop and think and have better self-control. Some kids feel it helps them make better decisions because it makes that space for them to think first before acting. Most kids don't feel that they're turned into zombies or robots who just behave well automatically. And kids don't think it's right to use ADHD or their medication as an excuse for bad behavior or poor performance on a test, although that doesn't mean they don't try it out. Children don't have many opportunities to talk about ADHD or their medications. Still, they were really thoughtful about weighing up the positives and negatives. Medication is annoying to take, let's face it. There's having to take it every day, that's annoying. And then there are side effects for some children, such as low appetite or trouble sleeping. And some kids feel different from other kids because they have ADHD. But at least in our study, most children say they would rather take the medication than worry about the symptoms of ADHD. For some kids, ADHD makes life rather hard. Kids with ADHD who are more impulsive and aggressive tell us that they get bullied, but they also say that sometimes they themselves are the bullies. In places where ADHD symptoms means that it's difficult for a child to do well in school, children tell us that they're more afraid to tell their friends or even their teachers that they have ADHD. That can be a lonely secret for a child. Unfortunately, most children also feel like they can't talk to their doctors about their ADHD. Some kids feel like doctors really aren't that interested in talking to them. In my view, that's one of the most troubling things children told us. Now, even if children feel okay about taking stimulant medication, shouldn't we as adults still be worried about some of the social problems associated with ADHD diagnosis and Ritalin-type drugs? For example, aren't we asking too much of our children by asking them to sit inside at desks for hours at a time, demanding that they be good? Isn't it important for children to run around and be free, to be naughty, to be creative? These are important questions. Kids tell us that their break times during school feel too short. Sometimes they spend just 10 minutes outside in a whole day. We didn't get the impression that the curriculum is sufficiently creative or flexible for children who learn differently. We heard about great schools, where teachers find ways to engage kids with different learning styles through creative classroom activities, yoga, boxing, even gardening. But these were the exception. A more flexible and creative curriculum and a less pressured school day and more time outside would probably be positive for most children. But it's also important not to over-romanticize the joys of freedom for children with ADHD. Children tell us it's not necessarily fun to be hyperactive or impulsive or to have to work so hard to control your behavior. It's also not fun to get into trouble all the time or to be known as the class slow coach or dreamer. We did meet kids whose home lives or neighborhoods are so challenging that anyone would find it hard to concentrate on schoolwork or pay attention to the teacher. Children's inattention may well be an important sign that something is wrong at home or in the community. ADHD diagnosis and medication are not going to fix those problems, even if the child can focus a bit better in the short term. We need to address children's difficulties as a whole picture, rather than in small pieces. There are real and serious problems with the way we use stimulant drugs in raising our children. At the same time, after listening to the children in these animated clips, we have to acknowledge that stimulant drugs do good for many children. And I think the real challenge is to look at both these realities squarely in the face, the good and the harms. From that position, I think we will be less likely to spend our energies trying to find someone or something to blame for over-medicating our children. And we will be more likely to work towards minimizing the harms and maximizing the benefits of ADHD diagnosis and stimulant drug treatments. We need to be sure that children have a good quality diagnosis, all the information they need about diagnosis and treatment. We also need to educate children, teachers, and families in using non-drug strategies to support children's growth and learning. Very important, we need to give children plenty of opportunities for open, accepting, and challenging conversations with people they trust. This has to include their doctors. As children tell us in this series of animations, they need to be respected for their strengths. They need structure and supportive discipline. They need good friendships, and they need spaces where they can relax and unwind and play. And they need adults to realize how much there is to learn in talking openly with children about life's challenges. Let's bring children's voices into the debates about ADHD diagnosis and stimulant drug treatments. I hope you will view these animations and share them with others.